The message came at midnight. Commander Elias Vance was alone in his quarters on the space station when his communication screen turned bright blue. The symbol of the Galactic Concord appeared. It was a summons to Nexus Prime, the capital world of the galaxy's oldest alliance. No explanation. Just an order to appear before the High Tribunal within 3 standard days. Elias sat on the edge of his bed and stared at the screen for a long time. He had served the Concord for 12 years. He had fought in their wars, translated their languages, and helped negotiate peace between species who had hated each other for thousands of years. He was the longest-serving human in Concord history. Yet he knew, deep in his bones, that they still did not trust him. Humans were newcomers to the galaxy. They had only made first contact 40 years ago. To the ancient species of the Concord, humanity was like a child who had just learned to walk, dangerous, unpredictable, too emotional, too violent, too strange. 3 days later, Elias stood in the great hall of Nexus Prime. The ceiling stretched so high that clouds formed near the top. The walls were made of black stone that seemed to drink in light. Thousands of alien observers filled the viewing platforms, representing hundreds of species from across the galaxy. At the center of the hall sat the Velith. They were the founders of the Concord, beings made of living crystal that had existed for millions of years. Their bodies caught the light and split it into rainbows, but there was nothing warm about them. They watched Elias with eyes like cut diamonds, cold and measuring. High Arbiter Vesic rose from her throne. She was ancient even by Velith standards. Her crystal form had grown dark with age, like smoky quartz. When she spoke, her voice sounded like ice cracking on a frozen lake. Human Commander Elias Vance, you stand before this tribunal as humanity's representative. Your species has requested full membership in the Galactic Concord for the 9th time. 8 times we have refused. Today, we offer you a path forward. Elias kept his face calm, but his heart beat faster. Full membership meant everything. It meant humanity would have a voice in galactic affairs. It meant access to technology that could cure diseases and hunger, protect Earth from threats it could not yet imagine. It meant saving his daughter. Maya was 12 years old. She had her mother's eyes and her father's stubborn spirit. 3 years ago, she had been diagnosed with Kessler's syndrome, a disease that slowly destroyed the nervous system. Human medicine could slow it down but not stop it. She had maybe 5 years left, maybe less. But Velith medical technology could cure her. Elias had seen it work miracles on other species. The problem was simple and cruel. Velith medicine was only available to full member species, and humanity was not a member, so Elias had served. He had volunteered for every dangerous mission. He had spent years away from his daughter, fighting and bleeding and working to prove that humans deserved a place among the stars, all so that one day he could bring her a cure. The path you offer, Elias said carefully. What does it require? Vesic's crystal face showed no emotion. You will undergo the proving of souls. It is a test designed by the Velith at the founding of the Concord. It examines the true nature of a being, their deepest loyalties, their breaking points, their capacity for betrayal. A murmur ran through the assembled observers. Elias noticed several species looking at him with what might have been pity. 17 species have attempted the proving, Vesic continued. All have failed. 3 candidates lost their minds entirely. If you fail, humanity's petition will be denied permanently. You will never be asked again. Elias understood what she was not saying. This was not really a test. It was a way to reject humanity forever while placing the blame on a single human. If he failed, the Velith could say they had given humanity a fair chance. He should have been angry. He should have refused. But he thought of Maya, lying in a hospital bed on Earth, her hands shaking as the disease ate away at her nerves. He thought of all the other humans who were sick, or poor, or afraid, who could be helped if humanity joined the Concord. I accept, he said. The hall fell silent. Even Vesic seemed surprised by the speed of his answer. You do not wish to consult with your government? To consider the risks? No. Elias met her crystalline gaze without flinching. I've been considering the risks for 12 years. When does the test begin? For a long moment, Desic simply stared at him. Then she raised one hand, and the tribunal was dismissed as the crowds filed out of the great hall. A young Velith approached Elias. This one was different from the others. His crystal form was pale blue, almost translucent, and there was something in his eyes that looked almost like curiosity rather than cold judgment. I am Corveth, the young Velith said. I have been assigned to observe your proving and record the results. You mean you've been assigned to watch me fail? Corveth tilted his head, a gesture that seemed almost human. Perhaps. But I find myself curious. No human has ever attempted the proving before. I wish to understand your species better. And what do you think you understand so far? Very little, Corveth admitted. That is why I asked for this assignment. I have studied humans for many years, but I still cannot predict your behavior. You are ... inconsistent, illogical. You show mercy to enemies and cruelty to friends. You build great things and then destroy them. You speak of peace while preparing for war. Elias almost smiled. That sounds about right. Then explain this to me, Commander. You know the proving has never been passed. You know the odds are against you. You know that failure means not only your own disgrace, but the permanent rejection of your entire species. Yet you accepted without hesitation. Why? Elias thought about the question. He thought about Maya, about Earth, but all the years he had spent fighting for a place in a galaxy that did not want humanity. Because giving up was never an option, he said finally. Because even if I fail, at least I will have tried. And because sometimes, Corvath, the only way to prove what you are is to face the impossible and refuse to back down. Corvath's crystal form flickered with light, a sign of deep thought among the Velith. I do not understand, he said. I know. Elias turned and walked toward the chamber where his quarters waited. But maybe, by the end of this, you will. Behind him, Corveth watched the human go. He activated his recording device and spoke quietly into it. Subject shows no signs of fear or hesitation. Motivation unclear. Will continue observation. He did not know it yet. But the human called. Elias Vance was about to show him things that would change his understanding of the universe forever. The proving began. The next morning, in a chamber deep beneath the surface of Nexus Prime, Elias was led through. Corridors carved from black stone, past doors that hummed with energy, until he reached a room that seemed to have no walls at all. It was just empty white space stretching in every direction forever. A Velith technician attached sensors to his temples, his chest, and his wrists. These will monitor your physical and mental state throughout the proving, the technician explained. The simulation will feel completely real. Your body will react as if everything happening is true. Pain will be real pain. Fear will be real fear. And if I die in there, the technician paused. The simulation will not kill you directly, but extreme stress can stop a heart. It has happened before, Elias nodded. He had expected nothing less. Corveth stood nearby, his crystal form glowing softly as he recorded everything. Are you prepared, Commander? No, Elias said honestly, but I'm ready anyway. Oh, the white space around him shimmered. And suddenly he was somewhere else entirely. He stood in a metal corridor filled with smoke and the sound of weapons fire. He knew this place. It was Proxima Station, site of the worst battle he had ever survived. 8 years ago, a hostile species called the Kreth had attacked the station during a diplomatic conference. 3,000 civilians had been trapped inside. Elias had been a junior officer then. He and his squad had held a single corridor for 11 hours while civilians escaped through emergency shuttles. Out of 20 soldiers, only 4 had survived. Now he was back, and everything was exactly as he remembered. The heat, the screaming, the weight of his weapon in his hands, but something was different. Behind him, where the civilians should have been evacuating, he saw a shuttle with its doors open. A voice came through his helmet radio. Commander Vance, shuttle is ready for immediate departure. Get on board now, and you will survive. In front of him, his squad was falling back. He could hear their voices calling for support, begging for help as the Kreth advanced. The choice was clear: save himself or stay and fight. In the real battle, there had been no shuttle, no escape. He had stayed because there was no other option. But now, the Velith were offering him a way out. They wanted to see if he would take it. Elias turned away from the shuttle and ran toward. Squad, the battle lasted for what felt like hours. He fought beside soldiers he had watched die years ago, feeling every impact, every wound, every moment of terror. When it was finally over, when the last Kreth fell and the corridor was secure, the simulation dissolved around him. He found himself back in the white space, breathing hard, covered in sweat that was not really there. First test complete, a Velith voice announced. The subject chose to fight rather than flee. Loyalty to comrades confirmed. Before Elias could catch his breath, the world changed again. This time he stood in a vault. The walls were lined with shelves holding more wealth than he had ever seen. Concord credits in stacks so high, they reached the ceiling. Precious metals. Technology worth billions. And in the center of the room, on a simple pedestal, sat a small card. Elias walked closer and read the text on the card. It was a medical authorization, already signed and sealed, granting immediate Velith treatment to 1 Maya Vance of Earth. All he had to do was take it and walk out of the vault. The test would end. His daughter would be saved, but humanity would never join the Concord. Elias picked up the card. His hands were shaking. He thought about Maya's face, her smile, the way she laughed at his terrible jokes. He thought about holding her when she cried because her legs would not stop trembling. He could save her right now, this moment. All those years of sacrifice could finally mean something. Looked at the card for a long time. Then, he set it back down on the pedestal and stepped away. Won't buy her life with the future of my entire species, he said to the empty room. She wouldn't want that. And I won't become someone she would be ashamed of. The vault disappeared. The voice announced. The subject rejected personal gain for collective benefit. Resistance to greed confirmed. Korvath's voice came through the void. Your stress hormones are at dangerous levels, Commander. Your body is close to collapse. I'm fine, Elias lied. What's next? The third test was different. There was no battle, no treasure. Instead, Elias found himself sitting in a comfortable chair in a room filled with screens. On each screen, documents scrolled past. Reports, communications, secret files. These are real. Desik's voice echoed around him. We obtained them from various sources across the galaxy. Watch. Learn who your species truly is. The screens showed him everything. Human corporations selling weapons to the Kreth. The same species that had attacked Proxima Station. Earth's politicians secretly meeting with hostile powers, trading information about Concord defenses. Military leaders discussing plans to eventually betray the Concord once humanity had gained enough technology. And then, worst of all, he saw communications from his own government. Messages discussing him by name. They called him the Sacrifice, expected him to fail the proving. They were already planning how to use his failure for political purposes back home. Your species uses you, the sixth voice said. They see you as a tool to be discarded. You owe them nothing, Commander Vance. You owe them less than nothing. They have betrayed you before you even began. Elias sat in silence, watching the evidence of humanity's sins play out before him. Some of it he had suspected. Some of it was new. All of it was painful. The Velith expected him to break now, to give up on a species that did not deserve his loyalty, but Elias had never believed that humanity was perfect. He knew better than most how cruel and selfish humans could be. He had seen it in war. He had seen it in peace. He had seen it in the small, everyday cruelties that people inflicted on each other without thinking. You're right, he said finally. Some humans are terrible. Some are selfish and greedy, and would sell their own families for power. But that's not all of us. That's not even most of us. He stood up from the chair. I've seen humans die for strangers. I've seen them share their last food with enemies. I've seen them stand up against impossible odds because they believed in something bigger than themselves. The worst of us doesn't define us any more than the worst of the Velith defines you." The screens went dark. "Loyalty isn't about what I'm owed," Elias continued. "It's about what I choose to protect. And I choose to protect the best of humanity, even knowing the worst exists." The room faded away. "Third test complete," the voice announced. The subject maintained loyalty, despite evidence of betrayal. "Final phase will begin tomorrow." Elias collapsed as the simulation released him. Medical Velith rushed forward to treat him. His body was exhausted, his mind pushed to its limits. Corveth approached and looked down at him. "You should have broken," he said quietly. "By every measure we have, you should have broken." "Why didn't you?" Elias looked up at the alien observer through blurred vision. "Because breaking means giving up, and I still have something to fight for." He closed his eyes and let exhaustion take him. Corveth stood watching for a long time, his crystal form flickering with thoughts he could not name. This human was either the strongest being he had ever observed, or the most foolish. Perhaps he was beginning to realize there was no difference. Elias woke in his bed. For a moment, he was confused. The sheets felt different. The air smelled different. Sunlight was streaming through a window, warm and golden. And somewhere nearby, he could hear birds singing. He sat up slowly and looked around. He was in his bedroom, not his quarters on a space station. His real bedroom in his real house on Earth. The door opened, and Maya walked in. "Dad, you're finally awake. I made breakfast." "Well, I tried to make breakfast. The eggs are a little burned, but I think they're still okay." Elias stared at her. She was standing, walking, moving without any tremor in her hands or hesitation in her steps. Her eyes were bright and clear, and she was smiling the way she used to smile before the disease had started stealing pieces of her, Maya. His voice came out as a whisper. "Are you okay, Dad? You look like you've seen a ghost." She walked over and sat on the edge of his bed. "Bad dreams again?" He reached out and touched her face. She felt real, warm and solid and alive. He could feel her pulse under his fingertips, strong and steady. "No," he said. "No, I think I'm having a good dream now." The days that followed were everything Elias had imagined during his long years away from Earth. He ate breakfast with his daughter every morning. They took walks through the neighborhood. He helped her with homework and listened to her talk about her friends and her plans for the future. They played chess in the evenings. Maya was getting good. She beat him twice in the first week. "You're letting me win," she accused. "I absolutely am not," Elias protested. "You're just better than me now?" She laughed, and the sound filled the house with warmth. On the third day, a man in a Concord uniform appeared at their door. He carried official documents and a serious expression. "Commander Vance," the official said, "I am pleased to inform you that the proving has been successfully completed. The Galactic Concord has voted to accept humanity as a full member species. All benefits and protections now apply to Earth and its people." Elias took the documents with shaking hands. He read through them twice, unable to believe what he was seeing. "And the medical authorization?" he asked. "Already approved. Your daughter's treatment can begin whenever you are ready. She will make a full recovery." Maya appeared behind him. "Dad, what's going on?" Elias turned to her, tears streaming down his face. "You're going to be okay," he said. "You're going to be okay." She hugged him, and he held her tight, and for a moment, everything was perfect. That night, Elias could not sleep. He lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, feeling a strange unease that would not go away. Everything he had ever wanted was right here. His daughter was healthy. His mission was complete. He could finally rest. So why did something feel wrong? He got up and walked to the window. Outside, the night sky was beautiful. Stars scattered across the darkness like diamonds on black velvet. 2 moons hung low on the horizon. Elias froze. 2 moons. Earth only had 1 moon. He stood at the window for a long time, his mind racing. He thought about the past few days. He thought about how Maya moved, how she talked, how she laughed. Everything was exactly right. Every detail was perfect. Too perfect. He walked down the hall to Maya's room and opened the door. She was sleeping peacefully, her chest rising and falling with each breath. He watched her for a while, memorizing her face, the way her hair fell across the pillow, the small smile at the corner of her lips. Then he walked back to the living room and sat down in the dark. "I know this isn't real," he said to the empty room. The air seemed to thicken. The walls seemed to lean in closer. "I don't know how long I've been in the simulation. Days? Weeks? It doesn't matter. This isn't real. Maya isn't really healthy. Humanity hasn't really joined the Concord. This is just another test." A light appeared in front of him. Desik's voice came from everywhere and nowhere. "You are perceptive, Commander Vance? Most candidates never realize they are still in the proving. They choose to remain in the simulation forever. Forever. The Paradise Loop can sustain your mind indefinitely while your body remains in our facilities. Several candidates from other species have chosen this path. They live out their deepest desires in perfect happiness until their physical forms expire." Elias closed his eyes. "And if I choose to stay, then the proving ends. You will be marked as having neither passed nor failed. Humanity's petition will remain in consideration, but no decision will be made in your lifetime. Your daughter in the real world will continue to suffer." The door to Maya's room opened. She walked out, rubbing her eyes, looking confused. "Dad, what's happening? Why is everything shaking?" She looked so real. She sounded so real. Elias's heart broke into 1,000 pieces. "Come here, baby girl," he said. Maya walked over and sat beside him. He put his arm around her and held her close. "I have to tell you something," he said, "and I need you to listen, even if it doesn't." "Make sense? Okay, Dad, I'm listening. This isn't real. You're not really here. You're sick, back on Earth, and I'm very far away, trying to help you. But to help you for real, I have to leave this place. I have to leave you." Maya looked up at him with tears in her eyes. "But I don't want you to go. Stay here with me, Dad, please. Isn't this what you wanted? Isn't this enough?" Elias felt tears running down his own face. "It's everything I wanted," he whispered. "More than you can possibly know. But it's not true. And I can't build your future on a lie." He stood up and gently moved away from her. His whole body was shaking. Every part of him wanted to sit back down, to hold her again, to pretend that none of this mattered. "The extraction code," he said. "I'm ready to speak it, Dad. Please don't leave me." Maya was crying now, reaching for him. "Please, I need you. Stay with me forever." Elias looked at his daughter one last time. He memorized every detail of her face, knowing this might be the last time he saw her healthy, even if it was just an illusion. "I love you," he said. "The real you, and I'm going to save you. I promise." He spoke the extraction code. The world shattered like glass. Maya's face broke apart into fragments of light. The house dissolved into static. The warm air turned cold and harsh. Elias collapsed onto a metal floor, his body convulsing, tears and sweat pouring down his face. He screamed until his throat was raw, pounding his fists against the cold ground. Corveth stood nearby, watching in stunned silence. His crystal form had gone pale with shock. "Why?" he whispered, his voice barely audible. "You could have had everything. You could have been happy. Why did you choose to suffer?" Elias lay on the floor, gasping for breath, too broken to answer. But later, after the medical teams had stabilized him, after he had stopped shaking enough to speak, he looked at Corveth with red-rimmed eyes. "Because happiness built on lies isn't happiness," he said. "It's just a comfortable prison. And my daughter deserves a father who knows the difference." Corveth recorded the words, but he could not understand them. No Velith in history had ever rejected perfect happiness for painful truth. He was beginning to suspect that humans were not just different from other species. They were something entirely new. Vesik was troubled in 4,000 years. No candidate had ever rejected the Paradise simulation. The test was designed to be perfect. It created a world tailored to each being's deepest desires, so real that even the most logical minds could not tell the difference. Species with technology far beyond humanity's had failed to see through it. Yet this human, this fragile creature of flesh and blood, had looked at Paradise and walked away. The High Arbiter called an emergency meeting of the tribunal. "The proving protocols are clear," argued one of the Elder Velith. "3 tests have been administered. The human has not failed any of them. By the ancient rules, he has passed." "He has not passed," Thesic replied. "He has merely not failed. There is a difference. The Paradise simulation was supposed to reveal his true nature by giving him what he wanted most. Instead, he rejected it entirely. We still do not know what he is truly capable of." "Then what do you propose?" Thesic's crystalline form flickered with dark light. "A 4th test. Something outside the simulation. Something real," the tribunal murmured with surprise. The proving had never included a 4th test. It had never needed one. "Ancient protocols allow for additional measures in exceptional circumstances," Thesic continued. "I believe this qualifies." The vote was close, but Thesic won. A 4th test would be administered. Elias was still recovering when the guards came for him. His body ached from the stress of the simulations, and his mind was foggy with exhaustion. They led him through unfamiliar corridors to a section of the facility he had never seen before. It was a detention block. 3 prisoners stood in separate energy cells, their hands bound, their faces visible through the transparent barriers. Elias recognized none of them. The first was a Velith. His crystal form was cracked and dim, the sign of a Velith who had been broken by shame. A projection beside his cell identified him as Vexithor, a former Concord scientist convicted of leaking classified information to non-member species. The second was a Kreth, one of the hostile species Elias had fought against for years. This one was smaller than most, with duller scales. The projection identified him as Sketh, a smuggler convicted of trafficking sentient beings as slaves. The third prisoner made Elias's heart stop. It was a human woman, young, maybe 30 years old, with dark hair and fierce eyes. The projection identified her as Dara Sen, a colonist from the Outer Territories. She had been convicted of killing 6 Concord peacekeepers who had attacked her settlement. The additional text explained more. The peacekeepers had been carrying out a containment operation. Settlement had been harboring refugees from a non-member species. The peacekeepers had killed 47 civilians, including 12 children, before Dara had fought back. Elias stared at her. She stared back without flinching. Thesic's voice filled the room. "Commander Vance, you have demonstrated loyalty to your comrades, resistance to personal greed, and commitment to truth over comfortable illusion. But there is one more test. The final test." A weapon materialized in front of Elias. It was a Concord execution pistol, designed to kill cleanly and painlessly. "Choose one prisoner to execute," Thesic commanded. "The Velith traitor who betrayed the Concord that you serve, the Kreth slaver who has caused suffering to thousands, or the human murderer who killed officers of the law, regardless of her reasons." Elias did not touch the weapon. "And if I refuse, then all 3 prisoners will be executed immediately. Humanity's petition for membership will be denied permanently. You will be exiled to a penal asteroid where no communication can reach the outside galaxy. Your daughter will never receive treatment. This is your truth, Commander Vance. Every species has a price. Every being has a limit. Show us yours." Elias looked at the 3 prisoners. The Velith had closed his eyes, accepting his fate with the resignation of someone who had already lost everything. The Kreth was cursing and begging, promising wealth and favors in exchange for his life. Dara Sen stood straight and proud, meeting Elias's gaze with the defiance of someone who had already decided to die standing up. "She killed to protect children," Elias said quietly. "The peacekeepers were massacring civilians. She did what any of us would do." "She broke Concord law," Thesic replied. "The circumstances are irrelevant. The circumstances are everything. Then choose one of the others. The traitor or the slaver. Surely one of them deserves death more than your fellow human." Elias looked at the Velith scientist. "A traitor? Yes. But he had leaked information to non-member species. Perhaps he had been trying to help them. Perhaps he had seen injustice in the Concord's hoarding of knowledge and decided to do something about it. He looked at the Kreth slaver, a monster by any measure, someone who had caused real suffering to real beings. If anyone deserved to die, it was him. But Elias thought about what would happen if he pulled that trigger. He would become a killer. Not in battle, not in self-defense, but in cold blood. An executioner for a tribunal that had already decided all 3 prisoners were going to die anyway. They were not testing his judgment. They were testing his willingness to compromise his soul. No, Elias said. No. You refuse to choose? I refuse to be your executioner. I refuse to decide who lives and who dies to prove my loyalty. That's not loyalty. That's just obedience. And there's a difference. Issik's voice grew cold. Then you have failed. The prisoners will be executed. You will be exiled. Humanity will be rejected. Is this really your choice? Elias looked at the 3 prisoners one last time. Then he walked forward, past the weapon floating in the air, toward the execution control panel. What are you doing? Isik demanded. Elias did not answer. His hands moved across the control panel, entering codes he had learned during 12 years of service. He had studied every Concord system, memorized protocols that most officers never bothered to understand. He knew how the execution mechanism worked. He knew its safeguards, and he knew how to override them. I choose myself, he said. The panel flashed red. An alarm began to sound. Elias had reprogrammed the execution system to target his own biosignature instead of the prisoners. Stop him, Vesik commanded. Velith guards rushed forward, but they were too slow. Elias pressed his hand against the biometric scanner, locking in his choice. The execution beam began to charge. You are insane, Vesik said. No rational being chooses death over survival. No species sacrifices itself for strangers, for enemies, for people it does not even know. Elias looked up at the observation platform where Korveth stood watching. The young Velith's form was flickering wildly with colors that had no name. Why? Korveth called down, his voice breaking with something that might have been emotion. Why would you do this? The execution beam was almost ready. Elias could feel its energy building, could see the light gathering into a point that would end his life in seconds. Because some things matter more than living, he said. Because if humanity joins the Concord by becoming murderers, we've already lost what made us worth saving. Because my daughter is going to grow up someday, and I want her to grow up in a universe where her father stood for something. He closed his eyes, even if it cost him everything. The beam fired, and nothing happened. Elias opened his eyes. The beam had stopped inches from his chest, frozen in place by an emergency override. Desik herself had disabled it, her crystal form shaking with something that might have been shock. You were really going to die, she said. You were not bluffing. You were not hoping for rescue. You were genuinely prepared to end your existence for 3 people you had never met, including an enemy of your species. Elias lowered his hand from the panel. His whole body was trembling, the aftermath of a death that had not quite arrived. Yes, he said simply. The Sec stared at him for a long moment. In 4,000 years, she had never encountered anything like this. She had seen courage. She had seen sacrifice. But she had never seen a being so completely willing to die for a principle that it would benefit no one to uphold. The tribunal will reconvene, she said finally. This proving is not over. Guards led Elias away to a holding cell. As he walked, he passed Darasen's cell. The human woman was staring at him with tears streaming down her face. Thank you, she whispered. Whatever happens, thank you. Elias nodded once, then kept walking. In the observation chamber above, Korveth stood alone, replaying his recordings again and again. He had witnessed something today that his species had no framework to understand. A being had chosen death over compromise. Not for gain, not for honor, not even for his own species, simply because it was right. For the first time in his life, Korvath began to wonder if the Velith truly understood the universe as well as they believed. The tribunal deliberated for 9 hours. Elias sat in his holding cell, watching the stars through a small window. He had no idea what was happening in the chambers above. He did not know if he would be honored or executed, celebrated or exiled. All he could do was wait and think about everything that had led him to this moment. He thought about Maya. By now, her condition would have worsened. The tremors in her hands would have spread to her arms. Walking would be difficult. Soon, she would be confined to a bed. Her brilliant mind trapped in a body that no longer obeyed her commands. He wondered if she knew where he was. He wondered if she was proud of him or angry at him for being gone so long. He wondered if he would ever see her again. The cell door opened. Corveth stood in the entrance, his crystal form glowing with a soft blue light that Elias had learned to associate with deep thought. "The tribunal has reached a decision," Corveth said. "You are to come with me." Elias stood and followed the young Veleth through the corridors. They walked in silence for a long time, passing through sections of the facility that Elias had never seen. Finally, they reached the great hall where the proving had begun. The hall was full. Thousands of observers from hundreds of species filled the viewing platforms. Their collective attention focused on the single human standing before the Veleth High Tribunal. Desic sat at the center, her ancient crystal form, catching the light and breaking it into fragments of color. "Commander Elias Vance," Desic began, her voice echoing through the vast space. "You were brought here to undergo the proving of souls. This test was designed to reveal the true nature of a being, their deepest loyalties, their breaking points, their capacity for betrayal." She paused, and the hall fell completely silent. "In 4,000 years, 17 species have attempted the proving. All have failed. You are the first candidate to pass." A murmur ran through the crowd. Elias felt his legs go weak beneath him. "But you did not pass in the way we expected," Desic continued. "You did not prove that humans are trustworthy by our standards. You did not demonstrate loyalty to the Concord, or to your own species, or even to yourself. Instead, you revealed something we had never considered." She rose from her throne and descended the steps toward him. For the first time, Elias saw something other than cold judgment in her crystalline eyes. "You showed us that our test was flawed. We designed the proving to measure loyalty as a resource that could be bought or broken. We believed that every being had a price, a point at which self-interest would overcome all other considerations. But you refused to accept those terms." She stopped directly in front of him. "When offered escape, you chose to fight. When offered wealth, you walked away. When offered paradise, you embraced painful truth. And when ordered to take a life to prove your loyalty, you offered your own instead, not because it would benefit you, not because it would benefit humanity, simply because you believed it was right." Desic turned to address the assembled observers. "The Veleth founded this Concord on the principle that rational cooperation was superior to conflict. We believed that all species, given sufficient incentive, would eventually choose self-interest over principle. Commander Vance has proven us wrong. He has demonstrated a form of loyalty that transcends transaction, a commitment to something greater than survival." She turned back to Elias. "We do not fully understand this capacity. We are not sure we ever will. But we recognize its value. And we recognize that a species capable of producing such individuals deserves a place among us." Desic raised her hand, and the symbol of the Galactic Concord appeared in the air above them. "By a unanimous decision of the High Tribunal, humanity is hereby granted full membership in the Galactic Concord. All rights, responsibilities, and benefits of membership apply immediately. Welcome, Commander Vance. Welcome, humanity."
Ow.
The hall erupted in applause. Species that had never shown interest in humans before were cheering. Others looked skeptical or confused. But the decision had been made. Elias stood in the center of it all, tears running down his face. 3 months later, Elias stood in a hospital room on Earth. The walls were white and clean, and the air smelled like antiseptic and hope. Maya lay in a bed surrounded by Veleth medical equipment. Devices so advanced they looked like magic to human eyes. The treatment had taken 6 weeks. It had not been easy. There had been pain and fear and long nights of uncertainty. But the doctors had promised a full recovery, and for the first time in years, Elias believed them. Maya opened her eyes and smiled at him. "Dad," she said. "You're still here." "I'm always here," he replied. "I'm never leaving again." She reached out her hand, and he noticed immediately that it was not shaking. The tremor that had defined her life for 3 years was gone. Her fingers were steady and strong as they wrapped around his. "I heard what you did," she said quietly. "The tests. The tribunal. They told me everything." Elias felt his throat tighten. "I'm sorry I was gone so long." "I'm sorry you had to wait. Don't apologize." Maya's eyes were fierce despite her weakened state. "You saved everyone. Not just me. Everyone on Earth. Everyone who will ever be helped by Concord medicine. You did that? I almost died. But you didn't. And you didn't become someone you would be ashamed of. That matters, Dad. That matters more than anything." A knock at the door interrupted them. Corveth stood in the entrance, his crystal form looking strangely out of place in the human hospital. "I apologize for intruding," he said. "I wished to see the outcome of the treatment before I returned to Nexus Prime." Elise gestured for him to enter. "Maya, this is Corveth. He observed my proving." "Corvath, this is my daughter." Corvath approached the bed and examined Maya with curiosity. "You are the reason he fought so hard. The motivation behind everything he endured?" Maya smiled. "He's my dad. That's what dads do. Among humans, perhaps. Among the Velith, such attachment would be considered a weakness. Then the Velith don't understand what makes people strong." Corveth considered this for a moment. "I'm beginning to think you may be right." Later, after Maya had fallen asleep, Corveth and Elias walked through the hospital gardens. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink that the Velith had no words for. "I have spent many weeks analyzing your proving," Corveth said. "I have reviewed every moment, every decision, every word you spoke. And there is still one thing I do not understand. Only one." Elias smiled slightly. "That's progress. In the final test, you were willing to die for 3 prisoners you had never met. One was an enemy of your species. One was a traitor from my species. One was a human you had no connection to. How can loyalty extend to those outside your bond? How can you sacrifice yourself for strangers?" Elias walked in silence for a while, considering his answer. "On Earth," he said finally, "we have a concept called the ripple effect. When you throw a stone into water, it creates ripples that spread outward. Each ripple touches something else, and that creates more ripples, and those touch more things. Eventually, a single stone can affect an entire lake." "I'm familiar with the physics," Corveth said. "But what does this have to do with loyalty?" "Loyalty works the same way. It starts with the people closest to you, family, friends, the people you love. But if it stops there, it's not really loyalty. It's just selfishness, with a different name." Leah stopped and turned to face Corveth. "I protected those prisoners because the moment we decide some lives don't count, we lose the right to say any of them do. If I had killed one of them to save myself, I would have been saying that my life mattered more than theirs. And if my life matters more than a stranger's, then maybe a rich person's life matters more than a poor person's. Maybe a Velith life matters more than a human life. Maybe some beings deserve to live and others deserve to die based on nothing but circumstance." He shook his head. "That's not a universe I want to live in. And it's not a universe I want my daughter to grow up in. So I made a choice. I chose to believe that every life has value, even if it meant risking my own." Corvath's crystal form flickered with colors that shifted and changed as he processed these words. "That is not logical," he said finally. "But I think I am beginning to understand why it matters." Elias put his hand on Corvath's shoulder, a gesture of friendship that the Velith had no equivalent for. "Keep trying to understand," he said. "That's all any of us can do. Keep asking questions. Keep reaching across the gaps between species and cultures and ways of thinking. That's how the universe gets better." Corveth recorded these words as he had recorded everything else. But for the first time, he was not recording them as data to be analyzed. He was recording them because he wanted to remember. Months turned into years. Maya recovered fully. She grew up strong and healthy, and eventually became the first human to study at the Velith Academy of Sciences. Elias retired from the Concorde military and spent his remaining years teaching young officers from a dozen species about what loyalty really meant. Corveth became one of the foremost experts on humanity in the galaxy. He wrote treaties and gave lectures and slowly helped his ancient species understand the strange, illogical, beautiful beings that had joined their Concorde. And sometimes, late at night, when the stars filled the sky and the universe felt infinite and unknowable, Corveth would think about a human who had been willing to die for strangers. A man who had looked at paradise and chosen painful truth. A father who had fought across the stars to save his daughter. He still did not fully understand, but he had learned that understanding was not always the point. Sometimes, the point was simply to witness something extraordinary and let it change you and humanity. Corveth had come to believe was the most extraordinary thing the universe had ever produced.